You want to talk about John Tavares?
Yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, we'll start with Tavares, and then we'll move.
Let's talk about John Tavares.
Yeah,
And I know
who else we're gonna blame.
People have been piling on,
Yeah.
and it's been a big thing on Twitter, and people are defending him. And he's been bad, and he's not the same player he was going back to his first season in Toronto, going back to his prime years as the captain of the New York Islanders. This guy has so much trouble creating his own offense. I will even go as far as saying, Lepore, he essentially has zero ability to create his own offense. I think about it in terms of basketball. Like, in the NBA playoffs, it's like you need that dude, right? Even go back to the Raptors. You need a Kawhi Leonard who at the end of the shot clock, late in games, when it's a 1-2 possession game, a guy that can just go out there and get a bucket, a guy who can create his own shot, make a play for one of his teammates. And again, it's hard to find those guys, especially in the NBA. It's not like those guys grow on trees. And it's not like they grow on trees in the NHL either. But when you're being paid $11 million a year and you're the captain of the franchise, I expect you to have the ability to create your own offense and to make things happen. And to, at certain points in the game, whether it's a close game, whether, you're up by a goal and you need that second goal to kind of just pull ahead and win a playoff game. I would hope that John Tavares has the ability to make plays like that to help his team win big games. But Lepore, he has zero ability to do that, being paid $11 million a year. Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews, I think, have been great in this series.
Yeah, Marner's been our best player, like not even a talking point.
And when I talk about creating your own offense, you watch Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews, and I get it. They're better players than John Tavares, but they have the ability to create their own offense.
Even they drive play. Yeah.
Even William Nylander. And I know there was a play tonight that's been circulating on Twitter where he gave up on the puck in the corner. I don't know if you saw this, where the puck went into the corner and Eric Chernak went to go get the puck, and William Nylander essentially just bailed on the play because he didn't want to get hit by Chernak.
Oh, fuck.
After the podcast, go on Twitter. You're going to find it. Like, he's getting roasted for that. But then, of course, after that, he ends up scoring 2 goals in the third period.
Well, was it 5-0? It was 5-0 when he did that. Not that I'm giving him a pass, but
yeah, I know. It's one of those things. It's like everyone knows the game's out of reach. Nylander's not trying to get killed. You could say, oh, he doesn't have the heart and the passion and the will, but it's like, whatever, the game's over. I'm not going to beat him up too much for that. But even William Nylander, back to my point, he has the ability to create his own offense. And he's the 4th highest paid player on the team after Morgan Riley. But again, John Tavares, man, we got to see more out of this dude. Lepore, looking at his numbers through 4 games, 2 assists.
2 assists, yeah.
He's a -3, and he's essentially been a no-show offensively.
Yeah. I think with John now, it's later in the season. I mean, his body's not like he's got there's miles on those legs. Like we all know that based on like the style he plays and the weight he carries. The thing with him, I think he's at the point now, and this is not a defense for him. I just think this is a reality. He's not going to drive play. He's so capable of being very productive and being a very good player. He's just not at the point anymore where he can do it on his own. Like when I first saw they had put him on a line, was it with Kampf and Mikheyev? I was like, no way. Like, John can't do that. Like when he's with Nylander, and that first season, people forget when he scored 47 goals, like he was playing with Marner. Like a lot of those goals were put on a silver platter for him in front of the net. There's a lot of power play, easy goals. I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm just saying that was the reality of it. I just think Tavares is at that point now. And it might be like a late in the season thing, and that's not an excuse because, like I said, he's paid that kind of money and you got to show up when it's important. And the reality is that's the end of the season. But I don't know. We got to see something. It's more just about that. Like if we're going to be completely black and white at the situation, your captain who's paid $11 million has to be good. Like there's no excuse. There's no reasoning for it. And it's like that negative Leaf fan thing, man. I'm already like foreseeing the talk of the summer. If this keeps going the way it's going, last year it was Marner. Everyone hates Marner. We got to get him out of here. Fuck him. I don't want that to be for John Tavares. Like the guy from Toronto.
We're heading down that road.
Trust me, Bruno. I'm prepared. I'm very, very prepared. Like making $11 million, the guy from Toronto, like the captain. Like he's gonna turn into like the Fanuff like a joke again. Like, and I don't think we'll get to that point, but man, like I'm worried, and I'm rooting for him. Like I fucking love Tavares, so hopefully he gets a big goal or something in game 5.
And you can call me negative and say that I'm being too hard on him. But another reason, Lepore, I'm being so hard on him is because I'm looking down the line in these playoffs specifically and saying, how the hell can this team win a Stanley Cup if John Tavares is not going to produce?
Yeah. Well,
like if your number 2 center, who, like we're saying for the 500th time, makes $11 million a year and is expected to put up a point per game and score big goals in the playoffs, if he's not going to produce in the playoffs, Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews, as good as they are, I mean, how far can they drag you by themselves? At some point, you're going to need some secondary scoring here. And I understand some of these other guys like David Kampf have stepped up. Ilya Mikheyev, even Pierre Engvall has been solid. Like, there's dudes that have been stepping up. But if you are not going to get production from John Tavares, I just find it very, very difficult for this team to make it through 4 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs if this dude is just not going to produce offensively. And again, it's been a tough matchup taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are the back-to-back defending Stanley Cup champions. They know how to win. They know how to lock it down defensively. And I'm sure that's causing issues for John Tavares, but he's got to find a way to overcome that. And saying all that, I think that the Leafs can still win this series without John Tavares producing at an elite clip. I think it's possible, but it's just making it so difficult. Like if this dude is not going to find that next gear, it's going to cause problems. And again, it might not cause problems in this series, but if this thing goes the distance, if this thing is going 7 games and it's a tight checking game, you're going to need him to step up at some point. And if they're going to move on to round 2 and play Florida or the Washington Capitals, whoever it ends up being, you're going to need John Tavares to step up. So again, I'm looking at this more in a long-term perspective as opposed to a short-term, because he's got to step it up if this team is going to make a run deep into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Lepore,
we need him to play well if we want to win the series. Like we can't sugarcoat this anymore. And like I touched on it already, like I defended the shit out of Marner all last summer and going into this year simply because like I love the player. He's a great player. Let's face it, he's one of the greatest players in the history of this organization. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a fucking shitstorm when you make that kind of money, you don't produce. And with Tavares, like we need it. And like Bruno said, the Leafs cannot advance without it. So like something's got to happen here. Like I don't have much more to say. Like there's no explanation. There's no magic wand we can wave to get him going. But like I'll ask you, Bruno, with regard to like the line mates, like is that a completely shitty excuse?
I think it is, because again, when you are paid in that bracket and you look at all the other players in the league who make $11 million a year or somewhere in that range, anything over 10 million, let's say.
Yeah.
I would say 98% of them, and I know there's some bad contracts floating around out there. I totally get it, but let's say over 95% of those guys have the ability to make plays, create their own offense, and be game breakers, whether they are defensemen or forwards or goalies. Okay. And I know Sergei Bobrovsky makes $10 million. He's a roller coaster. And I know, Carey Price, obviously he was God in the last playoff run, but I know he is not really living up to his contract either. But most of the guys that make that much money make shit happen, Lepore. They do things that help their team win. And right now, John Tavares, I don't give a shit about his face-offs and his defensive play. Yeah. What pisses me off, like when people like defend Tavares and say like, oh, he's great in the face-off circle and he's a great two-way player. Like Sheldon Keefe does that to deflect things off of John Tavares. Yeah. When you hear Sheldon Keefe in a press conference be like, listen, John's been great on both sides of the puck. He's doing a good job. He's doing the little things. Like I honestly think that's him deflecting, because he doesn't want to throw his captain under the bus. And he knows more than anybody that he needs more out of his captain. And I don't think it's a matter of like, oh, he needs better line mates. No, John Tavares should be able to make his line mates better. Like we saw in New York when he made Matt Molson a really good player. Everyone remember that? He made Matt Molson, an undrafted player. He turned him into like a 30-goal scorer. And again, I get it. Tavares is not the same player. He's lost the step. He's older now. But come on, man. He's in the middle of this contract. He's not that old. The dude's like 31, 32 years old. Sidney Crosby is still out here flying around, producing in the playoffs. And John Tavares has done nothing at 5-on-5, Lepore. Nothing. He set up William Nylander tonight. I'll give him that. Nice cross-ice pass to Nylander on his second goal, that one-timer. But my goodness, the Leafs need more out of him. And I'm sorry if I'm, really going in on Tavares here and you guys think I'm unfair and I'm wasting too much time on this, but I think it's a real issue for this team right now and moving forward in the playoffs.
Yeah. Like when the beaking started, I was kind of like, okay, here we go again. Like we have to find out when we lost game 2, like with K2 game sample size, we have to find a player to blame, but it's continued through games 3 and 4. And I'll ask you, where do you see this going? Because like where I get worried is players don't get better, they get worse. And John's got 3 years on his deal left after this one. So I'm almost kind of questioning, like, how can this end up being positive? And again, like to the point of how guys get older and get worse. If it is going to have a positive spin, it's got to happen now. Because it's way more likely that it happens now than it happens later in his contract, right?
And that's the thing, right? You would have hoped that he'd still be in that part of the contract where he's still producing at an elite level. And listen, I don't want to hear that he was a point per game player this year. I don't give a shit, because what I've been watching, even throughout the season, he was a point a game player, but honestly, there was a lot of nights he didn't make an impact.
Just that, there was like, the scoring was way up this year. I think there was like 50 or 55 point a game guys or point a game ish guys this year.
Yeah. So I don't want to hear that about John Tavares, that, he was still near a point per game. I don't care, because what we have been talking about at certain points this year on this show and what we've seen now in these first 4 playoff games, he just hasn't been good enough. But Lepore, honestly, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well. This contract is going to be an anchor because he's going to continue to get worse. He is not worth that price tag anymore. And like I said, there's other players around the league who aren't worth their price tags. But Lepore, what happens with those players? They hurt their teams. Like, look at the Chicago Blackhawks right now Patrick Kane still produces at an elite rate, but Jonathan Taves does not. Yeah. That contract is an anchor. Even looking at like Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns, who have taken a step back. That San Jose Sharks team is not in a good spot right now in terms of their salary cap situation. Imagine the Florida Panthers, if they were able to give that $10 million contract they gave Bobrovsky, if they were able to spread that a little bit more throughout their team, and they just won the damn President's Trophy. Imagine how good they would be. So there's teams around the league that are being held back by some big contracts, and I'm fearing that the Leafs are going to move into that same realm with John Tavares here. And I don't know if it's a matter of, I don't know if you can trade the contract. They're just in a tough spot because obviously they knew, I think Kyle Dubas knew that he was overpaying John Tavares and that the contract would age poorly, but he was essentially hoping that within the length of that 7-year contract, the Leafs would have at least one long playoff run and hopefully win at least one Stanley Cup with essentially this all-star cast that they have up front on forward.
Yeah. I think, and we're going to get ahead of ourselves here with regard to John getting traded and what's going to happen in the years to come, but the contract was built in a way that it's meant to be traded. He was paid a lot of his money up front, and I don't know the exact breakdown. I'd have to look at it to what he's actually owed financially in the last 3 years of the deal. But I think it could be traded at the end of the day. Like I don't remember the numbers, but say it's like $8 million that he's actually owed per season or less, or a little more for that matter. There'll be a taker for that.
That's fair.
And again, still a point a game guy or whatever. And I'm not sitting here. Maybe the Leafs win the Stanley Cup and we're laughing at this conversation.
Exactly. Maybe we're complete morons.
Yeah, in a few weeks. But to get that to happen, he's got to produce. So then we'll just say, well, he produced. He did what we asked him to do. So yeah, I mean, how when you first saw that deal with Tavares, and like now we're on this topic, were you completely okay with it, or did you know like were you a little nervous?
I'll admit, at the time, I was totally okay with it because when he signed it, I believe he was 28. Going into his age 29 season. So again, and right now, listen, the new prime in the NHL is like that 23 to 27 window. That's what it seems like to me, at least.
Yeah.
When you get over, when you're like 29, 30 years old, that's when you kind of start to decline, unless you're like a super elite player like Crosby or Ovechkin, like unless you're like a Hall of Famer, right? So at the time, I'll totally admit I was totally fine with it. And then seeing what he did in the first year with Marner scoring 47 goals, I was loving it. But there was a thought in the back of my head, especially over the last 2+ seasons. I'm like, man, just the way he looks out there when he's not playing with one of the top guys, like he just doesn't look the same. And this thing by year 5, 6, 7 is not going to look very good.
Yeah, I think Tavares, and again, he's not like, he doesn't suck or anything like that. We're just seeing a decline. I think just like a broad hockey topic is that this is going to sound weird. Like the body of the elite hockey player has changed. Like you see these guys, like the ultimate example I always bring up is actually Dion Phaneuf, where you look at just the style of athlete he was, like kind of thick and burly and heavy, and like his hips weren't that good. He wasn't fleet of foot. Dion Phaneuf would have been like a number 1 Hall of Fame defenseman pre-lockout, if with the clutching and grabbing is the style of the game. And you say like Tavares at his age, who drafted number 1, like do the math on how many years ago. Say, I don't think that type of player would have the hype John Tavares had. That type of player would have that hype now, just because I think that type of frame, that type of body, and again, maybe he'd still be dominating junior, so who knows. But to the point of like the decline, I think a lot of these guys now, maybe they won't decline like this, or the guys who don't decline, like you mentioned, like the Crosbys and such, the Canes, they don't have a body like that. They seem like they're more flexible, they're more agile, they're fleet of foot, like, and it's not like, oh, they've just kept it. No, they've always been like that, and Tavares has never really been like that. So I think that's a big part of it. And it's kind of like a change in the NHL. So I wonder how much that was looked at when that contract was given out, and like what the end. I mean, they were aware that there was going to be a decline at some point, but I'd like to know what was like the anticipation like with regard to like when and how bad.
I think the biggest thing that you mentioned is that he's just not fleet of foot. Yeah. I think that's what's led to his decline, is that he just doesn't skate as well as, some of the other players that we talked about. And that's an issue, especially in today's NHL. Like I look at Steven Stamkos. It's interesting because remember when Tavares scored his 47 goals in year 1, Leaf fans were like, yes, thank God we signed Tavares over Steven Stamkos.
Right.
They are the exact same age. They were both born in 1990. And now it looks like Stamkos
it's funny.
is actually aging better than John Tavares. And listen, Stamkos is not, I mean, he's a better skater than John Tavares, but the one thing with Stamkos is he has that shot.
He's also he's slimmer, he's more agile. Like
yes,
he moves
he's more
around
of like
better.
He's more of an athlete.
Yeah.
Like I remember
not a rugby player.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've interviewed Steven Stamkos in the past, and one thing I know about him is that
humble brag.
little humble brag. He loves baseball. Like this dude was like a really good baseball player, and it got to the point where he couldn't keep playing like men's league baseball in the summer because now he's Steven Stamkos. But like growing up, like he was like really good at baseball. Like, again, I don't want to say he was going to play like in the major leagues or something like that, but Steven Stamkos just strikes me as a dude who can play like any sport and he would just be good at it because he's just a really good athlete. Whereas I don't think John Tavares is the same athlete. And I know that like, his family was like, who's the dude that plays lacrosse?
I think his name was his uncle. I think his name was John Tavares.
Yeah, his uncle. Yeah, exactly. John Tavares, who's like an incredible lacrosse player, and John Tavares himself was good at lacrosse, but he still doesn't strike me as a guy who's as athletic as like a Steven Stamkos or a Sidney Crosby, or, let us know if you come up with another example. So it's interesting to compare what Tavares and Stamkos have done over the last few years. And again, Stamkos has been in a better situation with the defending back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. But Stamkos just had 100 points this year, 40 goals and 100 points, his first career 100-point season. And he's the same age as John Tavares. And, we even saw tonight that electric shot that he had to score the opening goal for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And again, Steven Stamkos hasn't been fantastic in this series by any means, but I think he's been a hell of a lot more dangerous and impactful than John Tavares in this series.
It's kind of funny, again, the point. People forget that that first cup Tampa won, they essentially won it without Stamkos. I remember the talk in the summer was maybe, if not the year after, if it would happen eventually, that they would trade Stamkos. So, look how good they won the cup without him. Like, imagine what they could do if they had that money to spread around. And now here he is, 40 goals, 100 points, looking great. You know what I mean? Just funny, man. Hockey opinions change quick.
Yeah, it's funny how things can change so quickly, especially in just one playoff series. Narratives can do a complete 180.
Yeah.
Even when you're least expecting it. So
so in a week when Tavares scores the overtime winner in game 5 and 6, we'll just be like, fucking Stamkos is shit. Tavares is the
best
man.
Contract ever.
Yeah.
Dude, you're the greatest GM of all time.
Yeah. Because sports.
Lepore, let's move off of John Tavares before Leaf fans want to strangle us for this, because maybe we've been a little bit too hard on the captain, but I've liked this conversation. It was a good, honest conversation